welcome back and welcome to day 4 of our 5-day beginners yoga challenge, a collaboration between Flow with Grace Yoga and a conscious community. Today we're going to warm up the body with a few core exercises that are commonly seen in a yoga class, but don't worry, we're going to give modifications and we'll have some fun with it. And then we're going to continue with our seated postures, and these postures are usually done towards the end of class to help cool the body down and stretch any tension out that we may still have lingering inside. We're not going to need anything except a mat and maybe some water. Smile, and when you're ready, you can meet me back here on your mat. Welcome back. I hope you're ready to get started because we're going to kick right into a Navasana. And this is also called boat pose. You can see this quite often in yoga classes, and usually the middle of the class to help reheat the body with some core work. And so what Navasana looks like as a full expression is legs straight out, arms either extended out by the legs or overhead. So our core is engaged and we're nice and strong. We're not going to start there today. That's just an image of something that you might see in a class, but I'm going to show you how we can access that posture without overstraining ourselves. So starting in a seated position in the center of your mat, you want to face towards the front of the mat here, and you want to have your soles of the feet on the floor and your knees are bent up towards the ceiling or sky. To make it super duper nice and simple, you can bring your arms back behind you, rest your hands onto the mat just behind your hips, and then you can start to lean back and hover the feet off of the floor. So our shins are parallel, we're supporting some of our body weight with our hands, but ideally here, to get better and progress, you want to start to engage the core even more and maybe take less and less weight off the hands. So that is way number 1. The next step to progress would be to start off in the same position. So our hands are on the mat. You want to push your chest towards your knees and maybe grab for the back of the thighs. So this is like level 2. This is a little bit harder as we don't have the weight in our hands, but we do still have some kind of support with our arms. Level 3, and I hope you're all trying these with me alongside, is we'll find that modified Navasana. So our hands are grasping for the backs of the thighs. The next level is to keep the knees bent, but extend the arms out in front. So we're getting rid of that support we have with our arms, and now solely relying on our core muscles. Beautiful, come down. We're gonna do one more. This time we're gonna try and extend one leg at a time. So again, find that Navasana, arms extend out in front, and then just try straightening one leg and then the other. Maybe if you're feeling nice, extend both legs and then come down. Beautiful. So we'll leave that one alone there. You can always revisit the video if you need to hear an explanation of one of those modifications again. We're going to move on to our side plank, which is actually a very difficult posture, and it does come up quite often in a yoga class. Usually if it's starting to become a little bit more of an intermediate class, they'll start throwing it in more as a transitionary position. So I'm going to show you how we can modify it so that you can have this posture seem not so crazy and intense. So we're going to start out in tabletop. So we're firm underneath our shoulders with our wrists and our hands, and then you can extend one leg out and then the other and find your plank pose. So just like in a regular plank, how the modification is to drop the knees down to the floor, it's the same idea for side plank. So you're going to find your full plank here, and then you're going to bring your left knee down towards the mat. From here, you're going to start to lift that right arm off of the ground and up towards the ceiling. So just like that, we have a modified side plank here. And then this is more than okay. This is a perfect side plank to take in a class if this is what feels good for you. If you want to start to progress out of having your knee on the mat, you can start to dig that right foot in towards the floor and just bring that left knee off of the mat for about a second or so. And then with a full expression of a side plank, and what we may want to work towards is to eventually have both legs extended out. Typically the feet are stacked over each other and we're pressing through this left standing arm to really find a nice strong center line. Beautiful. Come back to center, drop the knees, and we'll sit back to our heels. Recatch your breath, take a moment and see how that felt, especially in that left shoulder where there's a lot of strength and stability that's being asked of it. We're going to move on to the other side. So again, we're going to set up for our side plank on the right hand side. You can go straight from a tabletop or you can transition through a plank. So hands come down, walk those feet out. We'll find our plank posture. And then you can drop the right knee down, pivot on the left foot, and that left arm reaches up towards the ceiling. Just like so. See if there's any differences from side to side. We're often not very symmetrical in our abilities and in our strength. So it's okay if one side feels way harder or way easier than the other. Now we're going to do the same exercise. Press firmly through that right hand. We have a puppy appearance. And then start to lift that right knee off for little seconds at a time. You're going to get a nice crunch and oblique work here. And then if you feel brave and you want to try, you can extend the right leg out as well and try that full expression of a side plank, even if it's only for half a second. And then when you're ready, come back down to kneeling. Beautiful. So those are two typical core exercises and postures that come up in a class quite regularly, especially if you have a teacher that really likes to do core. You'll see more and more of those poses, and sometimes some postures thrown in at the beginning, like hovering your feet. But for the most part, a typical yoga class for a beginner will have maybe a Navasana, maybe a side plank. So those gives you some foundations and ideas of how to grow the strength in your core to be able to hold those postures for longer or find a different expression of the pose. Awesome. So the hard work is done. Hopefully you were warm. If you're not warm, feel free to pause the video, do another sun salutation or two, and then we can meet back here and get started so that we're ready to go into these postures safely. We're going to do two exercises that are actually done on our feet just to help lengthen and stretch out our legs a little bit before we continue. So we will find ourselves in Tadasana at the top of our mat, and then we're going to inhale our arms up overhead and exhale, same principles, fold forward, except this time, instead of coming halfway up, we're going to bend the knees quite generously so that our torso can rest on our thighs, and we're going to hang forward. You can grab for opposite elbows or cross the arms. And just let the head go. You can shake it yes and no. If you have long hair, you're probably sweeping your mat with it like I am. And then maybe start to straighten the legs just a little bit, making sure that you still have contact between your ribs and your thighs. And we'll hold here for one more breath. And then nice and slow, we'll come all the way back up to standing. Uncurl your spine, one vertebrae at a time, between the shoulders. Beautiful. And then we're going to find Malasana. So we'll come to the middle of our mat. We're going to bring the balls of our feet to the outer edges of our mat and have our heels pointed in towards each other. And then from here, you're going to start to bend the knees and squat all the way down. So don't be afraid if as you're coming down, your body's like, this is not working for me. It's okay, I'm going to show you how to make this more accessible. So this is our Malasana, our Yogi Squat. So what we have here is our heels are down and we're we're spreading the knees wide apart with our elbows, and we have a nice proud chest, so we're pulling our chest up and having a nice tall spine here. This is what Malasana looks like in a full expression. So to make this more accessible, because maybe our heels aren't on the ground, you can place blocks or blocks or anything to give some height, tennis balls, whatever it is, to give some height for those heels. If you have nothing, it just becomes a little bit more active and you're on your toes, and that's fine. Maybe coming all the way down is a problem, and so we can be here and we can work towards slowly lowering down. But this is another thing that comes up in a yoga class quite often, is a yogi squat. So don't be afraid if your hips are like, this is not working for me. You can use those things. If you're in a studio, they will have blocks and something for you to prop either underneath your hips so you can sit on a block, or underneath your heels if your heels need a little bit of height there. And then the other option as well is to have the knees closer together, so you don't have to have them quite as wide as I did. And if your knees are pointing more forward, but this is more comfortable for you, by all means start here. All right, so that is our ragdoll, as we call it, where we hang forward, and our Malasana squat. Okay, so we're gonna come to a seat in the middle of our mat. And then from here, we're gonna make sure we have enough space to lie back. So the soles of our feet stay on the mat, our knees are pointed up towards the ceiling or the sky, and we're gonna come all the way down onto our backs here. All right, so from here, you wanna bring the heels in just so you can graze them with your fingertips. You're gonna press your hands firmly into the mat, and then you're gonna press into your feet, engage your glutes and your core, and you're gonna lift your hips up. So this is our bridge pose. Another option here is to interlace the hands behind the back and roll the shoulders under in order to get a little bit more height. We'll take 2 breaths here. And then release the hands and come all the way down. You're gonna bring your knees in towards your chest and give yourself a little bit of a counter pose. You can rock side to side. And then you can use your elbows and prop yourself all the way back up to seated. So that is our yogi bridge. And that comes up quite often in a class as well. It's a nice gentle back bend. So if you have a sensitive back but you want to get more movement in it, that's a nice way to do it. And if you go to a more passive class, sometimes they will have bolsters or blocks, and it's a supported bridge, and so you'll put that underneath your sacrum and kind of rest your hips on the prop. So that's another way to do that as well, in a more relaxed way. And in the future, when I do my yin series with a conscious community, we will be going over that as well with fully propped up and supported postures. Okay, so the last 2, so the last two achieve the same result, the same type of stretch, but sometimes one works better for an individual based on the tightness of their hips, on how their knee feels, and on their glutes. Okay, the last 2 postures that we're going to go over actually achieve the same, if not a very, very similar result. And so I'm going to give you 2 options here because they do come up quite often, and sometimes it doesn't quite work well for people if they have very tight hips, if their knee has an injury or previous injury. And so I'm going to give you 2 options to achieve the same stretch. So the first option I'm going to go through is thread the needle. So again, we're going to be on our back. So just like we came down for bridge, we're going to come down once again. Our knees are pointed up towards the ceiling. We're going to keep the left leg as it is, and our right leg is going to straighten up towards the sky. Then we're going to cross our right ankle over our left thigh. So our right knee, points out towards the side. So from here, an important thing to note is to keep that foot flexed, and that's going to help protect the knee joint. From here, you can use your hand and gently start to press that knee away. Notice here the idea here is to get a stretch through the outer quad and through the glute. So if you feel it here, great, stop here. To go a little bit further, you can start to bring your legs in towards you. Make sure to keep that foot flexed. And if you start to bring that leg in and your hips start to pop up or your shoulders pop up, just know you've gone a little bit too far and you want to retreat a little bit. So you want to have both your hips and your shoulders in contact with the mat as you bring your legs in. Great, we'll switch sides. Right foot comes down onto the mat, left leg straightens up and crosses over. Again, you can work at pushing that left leg away, and then you can start to bring the legs in. You can bring that left arm through the space in your legs. Hold on to the back of the right thigh or the right shin. And then release, and we'll come all the way back up. So that's thread the needle, and that's a safer option to use. So that's thread the needle, and that's a safer option to use if you've had knee injuries in the past. The next one we're going to do is pigeon, which achieves the same stretch. However, we have our body weight kind of pushing our way down towards the mat, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. So if you have previous knee injuries, or if your hips are really, really tight and this next pose just feels wrong, please come out of it right away, and you can use thread the needle to get the same result. So starting from tabletop, from here we're going to take a little step forward with the hands, so they're just a bit farther than our shoulders. Then we're going to take our right leg and bring our right knee towards our right wrist. And we're going to walk our left ankle towards our left wrist slightly. And then you want to start to push that left foot back. And so this is your pigeon pose here. So here, if your right hip doesn't come down, again, you can prop it up with something if that feels good. But ideally, you want to be able to sit with both hips in contact with the floor. So this is our pigeon pose. A lot of teachers do have you recline. I only do that in a yin posture, and if you don't have your right hip on the floor here, I wouldn't move farther at all. So if it's hard for you to get into the posture, just stay upright, even if a teacher does tell you to start to walk your chest down towards your right shin, because that's just going to deepen the posture. So you just want to stay where you are until you're comfortable and you feel good in the pose, and then you can deepen it if that feels right for you. So just keep that in mind as well. All right, other side. So setting up from tabletop. Again, step forward with the hands, left knee this time to left wrist, and we'll bring that ankle a bit towards that right wrist. And you can walk your extended leg out. And again, you want to work towards getting that left hip down towards the mat. And you want to work towards squaring the hips off so that right hip isn't open. And you want to have it squared towards the front of the mat. Again, this is where you would start in an upright position. Some teachers will cue to then walk forward, but always listen to your body before you listen to a teacher. So rule number 1 of yoga, the biggest teacher in the room is your own body and your own self. Okay, thank you so much for joining in with me again today on day 4 of our 5-day challenge. Tomorrow we're going to bring everything that we learned this week together and have a 40-minute class. So be ready with some water, a mat, and maybe a strap. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful